They buried Elijah Crow on a Wednesday, because the preacher said Wednesday was the safest day to put a man into the ground. That was the first strange thing I heard about him, and it wasn't even said as a joke. I arrived in Camden, Alabama, 2 days after the funeral, with my notebook in my coat pocket and a stack of newspapers folded under my arm like armor. The train dropped me off in a town that smelled of wet pine and chimney soot, a town where the air felt thick, like something had happened here long ago and never quite finished happening. But wait for a second before we continue towards the video. Let us know in the comments which country you're watching from and what time of day it is for you. And don't forget to subscribe. Outside the station, a boy offered to carry my suitcase. I told him no. He watched me anyway, eyes too old for his face. "You here for the old man?" he asked. "What old man?" He nodded toward the road, toward the town proper, as if the wind itself had already told him my purpose. "The one who lived too long," he said. "The one they say was born a slave." The way he said it, like it was a curse rather than a fact, made my skin tighten. "Yes," I admitted, "Elijah Crow." The boy's expression flattened. "Then don't ask questions after dark." He walked away before I could ask him why. I'd been sent down from Birmingham by my editor, Mr. Harland, who had a nose for stories that made people argue at dinner tables. The headline that had floated up like smoke from Southern papers was too sharp to ignore. "Alabama man dies at 129, born in chains, lived to see cars and radio." There were always tall tales in small towns, especially about age. I'd written two before, one about a woman who claimed to be 114 and turned out to be 96, and another about a man who swore he'd fought in the Civil War and then couldn't name a single battle. Longevity stories were easy because they were warm, harmless, inspiring, but this one wasn't being told warmly. It was being whispered. At the boarding house, Mrs. Pritchard gave me a room on the second floor. She was a sturdy woman with forearms like hams and the kind of politeness that came with invisible barbed wire. "You're the reporter," she said as she took my dollar bills and counted them twice. "You folks always come after the dead. Sometimes the dead leave more truth than the living," I said, trying to sound clever. She didn't smile. "Not this one. You want supper at 6. Don't go wandering." "Don't worry," I told her. "I'm only here to talk." Mrs. Pritchard's eyes slid away from mine. "Talking is how it starts." That night I spread my papers across the small desk by the window and read every scrap I could find about Elijah Crow. Some articles were straightforward. A few quotes, a photograph of a thin elderly man in a chair, his skin dark and smooth in a way that didn't match the number beside his name. Others were strange. One columnist mentioned unusual circumstances around his birth. Another claimed local doctors had argued fiercely over his body. The photo bothered me. It wasn't just that his face didn't look like the face of a 129-year-old man. It was the way he looked at the camera. Not proud, not tired, not amused, wary, like the photographer had stepped too close to something it didn't understand. I took out my notebook and wrote the facts I had. Died May 1932. Age claimed 129. Birth claimed 1803. Wilcox County, Alabama. Former slave. Lived through emancipation, Reconstruction, the Spanish flu. Known to keep to himself. No known children living nearby. Left behind a lockbox per rumor. Then I wrote what didn't fit. Body reportedly well preserved. Church refused to hold funeral at night. Town whispers he came back, he saw it, he's the reason. I tried to sleep, but the town was loud in the quietest way. Floorboards groaned below. Wind scratched at the window like a fingernail. Somewhere far off, a dog barked on. And then cut itself off mid-sound as if it had bitten its own tongue. In the morning I went to the courthouse. The clerk, a man with a thin mustache and a sigh permanently stuck in his throat, looked at my press badge like it might stain his hands. "Birth records?" he repeated. "From 1803? I'm not expecting a neat certificate," I said. "Plantation logs, census records, anything that proves he existed." The clerk leaned back and stared at the ceiling. "People like to invent ages. Makes them feel important." "Elijah was important," I said. He finally looked at me. "Why?" "Because if he was born in 1803 and died in 1932, he outlived men who owned him. He outlived the system that tried to erase him. That's a story." The clerk's mouth twitched like he wanted to agree but couldn't afford to. He pulled out a dusty ledger and began flipping through it with slow hands. The pages smelled like old paper and regret. He found an entry and slid it toward me without comment. "Elijah, male, Negro, approx. 18, property of H. Whitcomb, 1821. My throat tightened. It was a slave registry, a list, and there, with ink that had browned into age, was the name Elijah. It was real. The clerk watched my face carefully. "That's as far back as we go," he said. "Records before the war, they burned, they flooded, they got lost, you know how it is." But I noticed something. Under the entry was a faint notation, like someone had written it and then tried to erase it. I leaned closer, squinting. The ink was thin, the handwriting sharp. Ran, returned, returned. I looked up. What does that mean? The clerk's eyes flicked toward the door. Means he ran and came back. That's unusual, I said. Most runaways didn't come back. He swallowed. Some did. Why? The clerk's jaw tightened, and he pushed the ledger away like it was hot. You got what you came for. I wanted to push harder, but the tension in his shoulders said I was already standing too close to whatever line the town had drawn, so I thanked him and left. On the courthouse steps, an old man sat on a bench with a cane across his knees. He wore a hat pulled low and had the kind of stillness that made you feel he'd been sitting there before you arrived and would still be there after you died. You're sniffing around Elijah, he said without looking up. I'm writing about him. The old man finally lifted his eyes. They were pale, almost watery, but there was intelligence behind them, sharp and careful. Writing about him is how you make him alive again, he said. He's dead. The old man shook his head. You don't know what dead is. I hesitated, then sat on the bench a few feet away. Did you know him? Everybody in a small town knows everybody, even if they pretend they don't. But the old man's answer came like a stone dropping into water. I knew of him, he said. We all did. Elijah Crow was the kind of man you didn't visit unless you wanted your dreams to turn on you. Why? He leaned closer and his voice dropped. Because he watched things, he said. And when you watch something long enough, it starts watching back. I swallowed. That sounds like superstition. The old man's mouth creased. Everything sounds like superstition until you live long enough to regret laughing at it. He tapped his cane against the ground. You want truth? Go see Dr. Harlan, not your editor, our doctor, the one who examined the body. Where do I find him? The old man pointed down the street. White House with the iron fence. If he speaks to you at all, you're either lucky or already marked. Before I could ask what he meant by marked, he stood up and walked away with a limp that didn't slow him as much as it should have. I found Dr. Harlan's house as described. White paint, iron fence, porch swing that creaked even when no one sat in it. I knocked. After a moment, the door opened a crack, and a man's eyes appeared. They were bloodshot, tired in the W. A of someone who hadn't slept properly in weeks. Yes, he said. My name is... I know who you are, he cut in. His gaze darted to my notebook. You're a reporter. Yes, I'm writing about Elijah Crow. The doctor's grip tightened on the door. For a second I thought he'd close it, but then he opened it wider and stepped back. Come in, he said, and close the door behind you. The inside of the house smelled like antiseptic and old whiskey. Medical journals lay scattered on tables like someone had been searching for answers in paper and finding none. Dr. Harlan, no relation to my editor, at least not that I knew, motioned me into a sitting room. You want facts, he said. You want something you can print? Yes. He let out a short laugh, humorless. Print this then. Elijah Crow was not 129. Not in any way that makes sense, because if that man was born in 1803, his body should have been dust. He reached into a drawer and pulled out a folder. Inside were handwritten notes, measurements, and a crude diagram of a human body. I examined him, he said. I was asked to certify cause of death. I did my work like any doctor would. He handed me a page, estimated biological age 60-70. No significant degeneration of joints, skin elasticity preserved, teeth worn but not consistent with claimed age. My heart started beating faster. You're saying he didn't age. I'm saying his body didn't match the years attached to his name. Could it be a mistake? Misidentification? Dr. Harlan shook his head. I tried to prove that. God knows I tried. I checked everything. Church records, Freedmen's Bureau records, census entries, witness testimony. The man in those records was always Elijah Crow, always. He aged in ink, but not in flesh. He rubbed his temples like the words hurt. What did he die of? I asked. The doctor's gaze drifted to the window where sunlight fell in a pale stripe across the floor. Fear, he said quietly. I blinked. Fear isn't, he cut me off. Officially, heart failure. The body gave out. Old age finally did what chains and disease and violence couldn't. That's what I wrote. He leaned forward. But I was there the night he died. I was called because he was screaming. Screaming? Dr. Harlan's lips went thin, like a man being pulled apart. He wasn't in pain from his body. He was in pain from something else. He stood abruptly and walked to a cabinet. He opened it, took out a small glass jar and brought it to me. Inside, suspended in clear liquid, was a thin sliver of something dark. What is that? I asked. The doctor's hands trembled. It was under his fingernail, like he'd clawed at something before he died. I thought it was dirt, but it isn't dirt. He looked at me with a desperation that felt almost pleading. It isn't anything I can name, he said, and that's the problem. A chill crept along my spine. Did Elijah say anything before he died? Dr. Harlan hesitated, his throat bobbed. He whispered, he said, I was never supposed to come back. The words landed between us like a dead weight. Come back from where? I asked. The doctor didn't answer immediately. He walked to the mantel and picked up a small object wrapped in cloth. He placed it on the table between us and unwrapped it carefully. A key, old brass, heavy, with a strange notch cut into its bow like a symbol. Elijah had this in his hand when he died, Dr. Harlan said. His fingers were locked around it so hard I had to pry them open, my eyes fixed on the notch. Something about it made my stomach twist, like the shape was familiar in a way my mind didn't want to admit. A key to what? I asked. The doctor swallowed. To the lockbox. So the rumor was true. Where is it? I asked. Dr. Harlan stared at the key as if it might bite him. His house. His niece took his things, but she won't talk to anyone, not even the preacher. I leaned forward. Who is she? Miss Lottie Crow, he said. He lives on the edge of town, near the pine line. If you go there, go in daylight. Everyone keeps saying that, I muttered. Dr. Harlan's eyes sharpened. Because daylight is honest, darkness isn't. I should have left then. I should have thanked him, taken my notes, and returned to Birmingham with a tidy article about records and myths and a doctor's skepticism. But the key sat on the table like an invitation, like a dare. Doctor, I said, why didn't you tell anyone? Why didn't you go public? Dr. Harlan's laugh cracked into something almost hysterical. Public? He echoed. You think people want to believe a black man lived to 129 without God or miracle? Half of them would call him a liar. The other half would call him a devil. And the ones who believed the truth, his voice dropped, the ones who believed the truth would come looking for what kept him alive. He leaned in close enough that I said, to mine. Lottie ain't his niece, not by blood. Oh, I said carefully, then what is she? Mrs. Pritchard's face tightened. She's what's left after a story eats someone. I stared at her. What does that mean? She set the pot down and wiped her hands slowly, as if she needed the time to choose her words. It means, she said, that Elijah Crow didn't live 129 years because he was blessed. Her voice dropped lower. He lived that long because something didn't let him die. My throat went dry. What something? Mrs. Pritchard turned her head toward the window, toward the pine line in the distance. The trees there looked darker than the rest, like the sunlight refused to reach them. There's a place, she said quietly, where the woods don't belong to God. I felt the hairs on my arms rise. And Elijah, she continued, Elijah went there once when he was a boy, and he came back with eyes that didn't match his age. She looked back at me. You want to meet Lottie? You go to the edge of town. You'll see a house where the porch boards are always clean like it rained last night even when it didn't. She hesitated. And if she tells you to leave, Mrs. Pritchard added, you leave. I swallowed. And if she doesn't? Mrs. Pritchard's mouth tightened into something like grief. Then, she said, you're already too deep. That afternoon I packed my notebook, my papers, and the brass key. I told myself I was only doing my job. I told myself this was a story about records and age and myth. But as I stepped out into the sunlight and started walking toward the pine line, I realized my hands were shaking, not from excitement, from a feeling I couldn't name. Like the town itself was holding its breath, and somewhere beyond the trees something was listening. Somewhere beyond the trees something was listening. I didn't know that as a fact yet. I only knew it the way you know a storm is coming when the air turns heavy and the birds vanish. An instinct the body has before the mind can name it. The road out of Camden narrowed as it approached the pine line. Houses thinned, fences leaned, and the world began to look less like a town and more like a place that had forgotten it was supposed to be civilized. The sunlight still shone, but it felt weaker here, like it had to travel through something before it reached the ground. Mrs. Pritchard had described the house. The porch boards always clean, like it rained the night before even when it hadn't. I didn't believe her. Clean porch boards weren't mystical, just the work of a broom and a habit. Then I saw it. The Crow place sat a good distance from the road, tucked back behind a veil of low brush and tall grass. The porch boards were pale, scrubbed so thoroughly they looked bleached. The posts were straight, the windows were shut. And the yard was too neat, not tidy in the way of pride, neat in the way of fear. No toys, no scattered tools, no clothesline swaying with laundry, no signs of life except a single rocking chair on the porch that moved slightly back and forth, as if someone had just risen from it. I stopped at the gate. There was no lock, but the gate didn't swing open when I pushed it. It resisted like a stubborn animal until I leaned my weight into it. The hinge gave a long, protesting groan, loud enough that it felt like an announcement. The rocking chair stopped. A woman stepped out of the shadow of the porch like she'd been standing there the whole time. She was older, perhaps late 50s, with tight gray hair pulled back and a face carved into sharp lines by sun and worry. Her eyes were dark and steady, and when they met mine I felt the strange sensation of being measured, not by my clothes or my stance, but by something inside me I didn't know how to hide. "You're not from here," she said. "I'm a reporter," I replied, lifting my hands slightly to show I wasn't armed. "My name is Daniel Mercer. I'm writing about Elijah Crow." Her eyes didn't flicker. "He's buried." "I know." "Then write about dirt," she said. "It's quieter." I swallowed. "I'm not here to disturb anyone. You just want a story," she finished for me. Her voice was calm, but it had an edge that wasn't anger, it was caution. "And you came with that hungry look in your face that men get when they think a secret belongs to them." I felt my cheeks warm. "I came because the records say he lived to 129. "They say a lot of things," she said. I stepped closer, careful not to rush her. "Are you Miss Lottie Crow?" Her mouth tightened. "People call me that. Dr. Harlan said you might have his things." At the mention of the doctor's name, something shifted behind her eyes. An old recognition and something like resentment. "You talked to Harlan," she said. "Yes. And he didn't send you away? He warned me." Lottie's gaze dropped briefly to my coat pocket as if she could see the brass key through fabric. "He didn't warn you enough," she said. The rocking chair creaked once behind her, though no wind stirred. I forced myself to keep my voice steady. "I heard Elijah left a lockbox." The word lockbox seemed to tighten the air. Even the insects felt quieter. Lottie didn't answer. She just studied me for a long moment, then stepped down from the porch and walked to the edge of the yard. Her boots made no sound on the ground. "Mr. Mercer," she said finally, "I'm going to ask you something and you answer truth." "All right. Did you come here because you want to honor him," she said, "or because you want to open him?" The question hit me wrong, like she'd asked whether I wanted to pray or cut. I hesitated too long. Lottie's expression hardened. "That's what I thought." "I want to know what's true," I said quickly. "Elijah's story matters. If he really was born enslaved and lived through all that." "His story matters," she agreed, and the way she said it made me feel small. "That's why it ain't yours." I took a breath. "Then tell me whose it is." Lottie's eyes drifted past me toward the trees. "His. Even dead." She turned as if to go back inside, dismissing me. Panic flared, irrational and sharp. I fished the key from my pocket before my courage could vanish. "I have this," I said, her body stilled like I'd snapped a whip. She turned slowly. When she saw the brass key in my hand, her face drained of color. "Where did you get that?" she whispered. "Dr. Harlan," I said. "He said Elijah was holding it when he died." Lottie's eyes glittered, not with tears but with something like fury held in a tight jar. "That fool," she said. She crossed the yard in 3 quick steps and snatched the key from my hand. Her fingers were cold, and when they closed around the metal I saw her knuckles whiten. "You don't carry this around," she said, low and fierce. "You don't show it. You, Dawn, speak of it like it's a pocket watch." "I didn't know. You didn't want to know," she snapped. "You wanted to open." She held the key up, studying the notch cut into it, her thumb tracing the symbol as if it burned. Then she looked at me again. "Did Harlan tell you not to drink sweet tea?" The question startled me. "He did." Lottie's mouth twitched. "Then he knows some things." She glanced at the road, then at the trees again. The indecision lasted only a second. "Come," she said. I blinked. "You'll talk to me?" "I'll keep you from doing something stupid," she said. "That's different." She walked back to the porch and opened the front door. The inside of the house was dim, cool, and smelled faintly of cedar and something bitter, like dried herbs. "Close it," she ordered. I stepped in and shut the door behind me. The living room was simple. Worn sofa, a small table, a Bible on a shelf, and photographs on the walls that looked too old to be held together by anything but stubbornness. None of the photos showed Elijah smiling. Lottie moved with purpose, not inviting me to sit, not offering water. She walked to a cabinet and opened it. Inside were jars, glass jars with labels written in careful handwriting: sage, bay, salt, ash. She took out a jar of salt and poured a thin line across the inside of the windowsill. "What are you doing?" I asked. Lottie didn't look up. "Keeping the listening from getting closer." My mouth went dry. "Listening?" She turned to me. "You felt it, didn't you? On the road, like the woods leaned in." I didn't want to admit it, but lying felt foolish. "Yes," I said quietly. "I did." Lottie nodded once as if that settled something. "Sit," she said, finally gesturing to a chair. I sat. She didn't sit herself. She stood near the mantel, the key in her hand like a weapon. "You want to write about a plantation," she said. I frowned. "A plantation?" "The one they listed him under," Lottie said. "Whitcomb." The name tugged at memory. The clerk's ledger. "Yes." "You tried finding it on a map yet?" she asked. "Not yet." "You won't," she said. "You can search every map from here to Montgomery. It won't be there." "That doesn't make sense." "It makes perfect sense," she said, "because it wasn't a plantation the way you think. It was a trap." My skin prickled. "What are you saying?" Lottie walked to a small trunk near the wall and opened it. She rummaged inside with hands that didn't tremble, hands that had done this before. She pulled out a bundle of papers tied with twine. "This is what Elijah left," she said. My heart thudded. "The lockbox?" Lottie's eyes narrowed. "Not yet." She untied the twine and spread the papers on the table. They were old, yellowed, some written in ink, others in pencil. The handwriting varied. "Church records," she said, tapping one. "Friedman's bureau notes." Another tap. "A letter from a man who claimed he saw Elijah in 1868 looking the same as he did in 1830. She slid one paper toward me. It was a torn page from a ledger. On it was a list of names and numbers, like inventory. At the bottom, in faint writing, was a symbol, almost the same notch shape as the one cut into the key. "What is that?" I asked. Lottie didn't answer immediately. She moved to the wall and pulled down a photograph framed in cracked wood. "This is Elijah," she said. The photograph showed a man standing near a tree, his expression unreadable. The print was grainy, but the man's eyes were clear enough to make my stomach tighten. "He looks," I began. "Too young," Lottie finished. "That picture was taken in 1901. I stared. "That's impossible." Lottie placed another photo beside it. "This one was taken in 1872. My breath caught. It was the same face, same eyes, same mouth, same posture, only the clothes changed. My mouth went dry. "How? Don't ask me how," she snapped. "Ask yourself why." I swallowed, trying to keep my voice steady. "Elijah said he wasn't supposed to come back." Lottie's eyes flashed. "Harlan told you that?" "Yes." For a moment Lottie's guard slipped, and I saw grief under the hardness, grief sharpened into a blade because softness would have gotten her killed. "He wasn't," she said. "And he spent the rest of his life trying to make sure nobody followed him." Followed him, the phrase hit like a clue. Followed him where? Lottie's gaze drifted toward the back of the house, toward a hallway that disappeared into shadow. "You came with a key," she said quietly. "Which means the story already started to move." I leaned forward. "Please, I don't understand what's happening here." Lottie's eyes met mine. "You don't want to understand. Understanding is the first step toward believing, and believing is the first step toward opening." I hesitated. "Opening what?" Lottie held up the key. "This don't open a box," she said. "It opens a memory." I stared at her. "A memory?" She nodded. "Elijah called it a door, not a door made of wood, a door made of place." I wanted to argue, to force this back into reason, but the photogra. PHS sat on the table like stones in my stomach. "You said the Whitcomb plantation was a trap," I said. "Explain." Lottie turned away and walked toward the hallway. "Come," she said again, and this time there was no choice in it, only inevitability. I stood and followed. The hallway was narrow. The air grew cooler as we moved, as if the house got closer to the earth. Lottie stopped at a door near the back and placed her hand on the knob. "Before you see this," she said, "you need to decide something." I swallowed. "What?" "If you walk out after this," she said, "you don't come back. You don't ask, you don't write, you don't dig." "And if I don't walk out?" I asked. Lottie's jaw tightened. "Then you become part of it." I should have turned around. I should have left and caught the next train out, but my mind was already hooked. By the photographs, by the clerk's erased note, by the doctor's trembling jar. "I'm here," I said. Lottie opened the door. The room inside was small and windowless, like a pantry, but it wasn't filled with food. It was filled with objects. Old objects, arranged carefully on shelves as if each one mattered. A broken shackle, a piece of rope, a Bible with pages torn out. And in the center of the room, on a small table covered with a cloth, sat a wooden box, the lockbox. It was plain, no decoration, but the lock itself was strange. Not a simple keyhole, but a small metal plate with that same notch-like symbol carved into it. My breath caught. "That's it." Lottie stepped in front of me, blocking my view of the keyhole. "You don't touch it," she said. "I'm not." "You are," she snapped. "I can see it in your eyes, the way your hands want to move." I forced my hands to stay at my sides. Lottie reached up and pulled down a string hanging from the ceiling. A single bulb flicked on, casting harsh light that made the box look older, heavier, more real. "Elijah kept it locked for decades," she said. "He moved it from house to house like a man carrying a grave." "What's inside?" I asked. Lottie's eyes hardened. "Proof," she said, "and a map." "A map to the plantation?" I asked. Lottie shook her head slowly. "To where the plantation wasn't." She stepped back into the hall and closed the door, leaving the box behind darkness like something sealed away. Back in the living room, she placed the key on the table, not near me, but between us like a boundary. "You want to find Whitcomb?" she asked. "Yes," she nodded once. "Then you don't look for a plantation. You look for a place people avoid even when they don't know why." She walked to a shelf and pulled out a Bible, older than the one I'd seen earlier. Its leather cover was cracked, and the pages smelled like mildew. She opened it to a section marked with a scrap of cloth. "This is where the key was," she said. I leaned in. The pages were worn, and in the margin, written in ink so faded it was almost the color of the paper, was a verse reference. Book of Jonah, chapter 5, verse 12. I frowned. "Jonah doesn't have 5 chapters. Lottie's eyes flicked to mine. "No," she said softly, "it doesn't." A chill ran through me. "Then why is it written here?" I asked. "Because Elijah wrote it after," she said. "After he ran, after he came back, after he knew there were pages the Bible didn't hold." She flipped the page and revealed a hollow cut into the book's center, where the key had been hidden. "Elijah kept the key inside a verse that don't exist," she said, "because the place he came from don't exist on your maps either." My voice dropped. "Do people disappear?" Lottie's expression didn't change, but something behind her eyes tightened. "They do," she said, "and sometimes they come back." My stomach turned. Like the clerk's note, ran, returned. Lottie stared at me sharply. "You saw that?" "Yes." "Then you're already deeper than I wanted," she muttered. She stood and began gathering the papers again. Listen, she said, I'll give you one thing. One truth you can carry without opening the rest. I watched her hands, noticing how careful she was, as if each paper might cut. Elijah didn't live 129 years because time forgot him, she said. He lived because time couldn't claim him. I frowned. Stop trying to make it sound reasonable, she snapped. Where the old roads die. I swallowed. Where? Lottie pointed toward the pine line. There's a stretch of woods 2 miles east, she said. No trail, no path, just pines and black mud. Folks don't go there. Why not? Because when they do, she said, they hear chains where there ain't any. The air in the room felt colder. When do we go? I asked, though my stomach screamed at me to stop. Lottie's eyes were hard. Now, she said, while the sun's still honest. She shoved the wrapped key into a satchel and pulled on a coat. On the table, she left the carved token. Take that, she said. I picked it up. It felt heavier than wood should feel. As we stepped onto the porch, the rocking chair began to move again, slow and steady, though there was still no wind. Lottie paused, watching it with tight lips. Don't look back into the house, she muttered. Why? Because if you do, she said, you'll swear you see someone standing in the hall where the lockbox is. My neck prickled. I forced myself to face forward and follow her down the porch steps. We walked toward the pine line, and with every step the town behind us felt less real, like we were leaving the world that had rules. The trees waited ahead, dark, silent, patient. And somewhere beyond them, something that had no right to be awake began to lean closer. Somewhere beyond the pines, something that had no right to be awake began to lean closer. The moment we stepped under the first row of trees, the air changed. It didn't just cool, it thickened, like we'd walked into a room where someone had burned incense, and then left the windows shut for years. The sunlight filtered through needles overhead in thin, pale bars that didn't quite reach the ground. Everything smelled of sap, wet soil, and something faintly metallic beneath it, like old blood dried into wood. Lottie walked ahead of me without hesitation, boots pressing into black mud that didn't splash so much as swallow. She didn't look back to make sure I was following. She moved like she'd taken this route before, like she knew where the woods tried to shift people sideways. I kept my eyes on her shoulders, on the satchel bouncing lightly against her hip where she'd put the wrapped brass key. In my pocket, the carved wooden token pressed against my thigh with every step, reminding me I'd agreed, without saying it out loud, to go deeper than any sensible man should. After a while, I realized we weren't hearing much of anything. No insects, no birds, no rustle of squirrels in the brush. Even our footsteps sounded muted, as if the ground refused to echo them. I swallowed and tried to make my voice casual. Is it always this quiet? Lottie stopped so abruptly I nearly bumped into her. She turned, and her eyes were sharper here in the dimness, reflecting a thin sliver of light like a knife edge. First rule, she said quietly. I waited. If you hear your own name from the woods, she said, you do not answer. A cold prickling ran up my arms. What are you? She held up a hand. No questions, just listen. You answer and it knows you can hear it, then it don't have to whisper anymore. I stared at her. It will call my name? It'll try, she said. It tries everybody. Some folks answer without thinking. Some folks answer because they get curious. She stepped closer, and her voice dropped low enough I felt it more than heard it. And some folks answer because they want their mama, she whispered, or their husband, or their child. My mouth went dry. That's cruel. Lottie's expression didn't soften. That's accurate. She turned and continued walking. I followed, forcing my mind to focus on simple things, my breathing, the rhythm of steps, the way branches arched overhead. But the woods played tricks on attention. It made you feel like you were being watched from behind every tree and from inside the ground itself. After another 10 minutes, Lottie stopped again and knelt. She pressed her palm to the mud, then brought her fingers to her nose and inhaled. What are you doing? I whispered, despite myself. Checking, she said. For what? Lottie's eyes flicked up at me. If it smells sweet, she said, we turn around. I frowned. Sweet? Like flowers, she said, like rot pretending to be perfume. She stood and wiped her hand on her coat. It don't smell sweet today. That's good, right? Lottie didn't answer. We walked another stretch, and then the trees began to look wrong, not different in an obvious way, just subtly off. Trunks too close together in places, too far apart in others. Branches that seemed to bend toward us as we passed, as if the forest wanted to touch without being caught. The path, if there had ever been one, disappeared entirely. Lottie veered left, then right, then left again. My sense of direction started slipping like soap in water. How do you know where you're going? I asked. Lottie pulled the carved token from my pocket without warning, so fast I startled, and held it up between us. You feel that? She asked. I blinked. That's mine. Not yours, she corrected. Elijah's. It's a piece of a warning marker. He carved it so his hands would remember the way. She placed it in my palm again, but this time she pressed my fingers around it firmly. Close your eyes, she said. What? Close them, she repeated more forcefully. I hesitated, then did it. At first all I felt was the damp air and the thudding of my own heart. Then, so faint I thought I imagined it, I felt a pull, not on my body, on my attention. Like the token wanted to face a certain direction, like a needle seeking north. My eyes snapped open. That's impossible. Lottie's gaze stayed on my face. Say it quieter, she warned. The woods here pride. I swallowed. You're saying it guides you. It reminds me, she said. There's a difference. She gestured ahead. We're close. I looked forward and my stomach tightened. The trees parted slightly, forming a natural corridor, and beyond that corridor the ground dipped into a shallow hollow. The hollow was darker than it should have been, as if light couldn't settle there. The mud in the dip looked smoother too, less like earth and more like something melted and rehardened. At the edge of the hollow stood a post, a marker. It was a piece of wood hammered into the ground. On it was carved the notch symbol, deeper than the one on my token, the lines sharp enough to look fresh. Lottie approached it slowly. She did not touch it. I stepped closer behind her, and a faint sound reached my ears, a metallic clink, like chain link shifting. I froze. Lottie didn't move. She only lifted one finger, signaling silence. The clink came again, clearer this time. It didn't come from any one direction. It came from the air, from the trees, from the mud itself. I leaned closer to Lottie's ear. Do you hear that? She didn't answer. Her jaw was clenched so tightly I could see the muscles working. The clinking grew louder. And then, so suddenly it made my stomach drop. It stopped. The silence after it was worse. Lottie reached into her coat and pulled out a small cloth pouch. She loosened the drawstring and sprinkled something in a wide circle around the marker. Salt, I realized. Thick grains that flashed white against black mud. What does that do? I mouthed. Lottie didn't respond. She finished the circle and stepped back, keeping her eyes fixed on the hollow. Then she did something that made my blood run cold. She whispered, Elijah. The name hung in the air. For a second, nothing happened. Then the woods answered, not with a voice, with a feeling. The corridor between the trees seemed to deepen, like it was stretching farther than it should. Shadows pooled. The hollow looked less like a dip in the ground and more like a mouth opening. My lungs forgot how to take in air. Lottie spoke again, very softly, as if speaking to a skittish and, "Oh, we're not here to open." The air tightened. The chain sound returned, faint and distant. You're lying, I whispered, barely aware I'd spoken. Lottie's eyes cut sideways. I'm negotiating, she hissed. Negotiating with what? The question surged in me like panic, but I swallowed it. Lottie reached into her satchel and pulled out the wrapped brass key. She didn't unwrap it fully. She just exposed enough of the notch to show the symbol. Immediately the chain sound sharpened, as if something had leaned closer. My throat constricted. Put it away. Lottie's voice was a whisper. He ran from here, she said. He ran once, and this is where the story broke. She slid the key back into the cloth and tucked it away again. Then she turned to me. Now, she said, you're going to hear his words, not from my mouth, from his. I blinked. How? Lottie stepped to the side of the hollow and knelt. She pressed her palm flat to the mud, same as before, but this time she kept it there steady, like she was holding something down. Give me your notebook, she said. I hesitated. Her eyes flashed. Do it. I handed it to her. She opened it to a blank page, then took my pencil and wrote one word in large letters. Run. She tore the page out and held it over the hollow. Whatever's here, she whispered, likes words. It likes being named. It feeds on being spoken. Then she placed the paper on the mud at the edge of the dip. The paper did not get wet. It rested on the surface as if the mud beneath it had turned solid. My heart hammered. Lottie, quiet, she warned. This is where you listen without answering. She leaned closer to the hollow, not crossing the salt line, and began to speak in a tone that wasn't her own voice. Older, slower, weighted with memory. 1821, she said. Night. Elijah was 18 by the ledger's guess, but nobody knew his real age because chains don't count birthdays. He ran with 3 others. My skin prickled. She cut me off with a glance and continued. They ran because they'd heard there was a river beyond the pines that could carry them north. They ran because the man Whitcomb had started taking boys from the quarters and bringing them into the main house, and nobody came back the same. They ran because they'd rather die in the woods than rot in a place that called itself God-fearing while it did devil work in daylight. Her words painted it so vividly I could almost see 4 silhouettes moving through the trees, breathing hard, feet tearing at roots. The first boy was named Josiah, Lottie said. He was small and fast. He led. The second was Ruth, yes, a woman, and she carried a knife she stole from the kitchen. The third was Elijah, and the last was a man called Ben, older than the rest, who'd run before and been brought back with scars that didn't heal right. The chain sound returned, faint beneath her voice like a rhythm. They ran, Lottie continued, And they thought the woods were just woods. They thought if they stayed quiet they'd pass through like smoke. She paused, and the air seemed to pause with her. But the woods weren't woods, she said softly. The woods were a boundary. Something moved in the hollow, not visible but present. The darkness shifted like a deep body rolling under water. They reached this dip, Lottie said, and Josiah stopped, because the ground here didn't sound like ground. It sounded like a room. My mouth went dry. Elijah wrote later that he felt it before he saw it, Lottie said. Like stepping near a cliff in fog, like the world dropped away and didn't want you to know it. The chain sound sharpened again, closer now. The hair on my neck lifted. Then faintly I heard it, a whisper, not a clear voice, more like the shape of speech brushing my ear. I froze, eyes wide. Lottie did not look at me. She kept speaking, steady. Josiah said he heard his mama, she murmured. He turned his head and the whisper strengthened. Ed, and I recognized the tone, even before I recognized the words, because it was my name. Daniel. It came from behind me, or in front, or inside my skull. I couldn't tell, my lungs locked. Lottie's hand shot out and clamped onto my wrist with bruising force. Her nails dug into my skin, and her eyes bored into mine with furious warning. Do not answer. The whisper came again, closer, warmer. Daniel, come here. My throat clenched with reflex. My mouth twitched as if it wanted to form a response. Lottie's grip tightened until pain flared. She mouthed silently, don't. I swallowed hard, forcing my jaw shut. The whisper lingered for a moment, like something hovering at the edge of a door it couldn't open, then faded into the trees. The chain sound resumed, slow and satisfied. Lottie exhaled through her nose. Good, she whispered. My voice came out broken. That wasn't, I know, she said coldly. Now you believe a little. That's dangerous. Keep it small. She turned back to the hollow and continued the story as if nothing had happened. Josiah turned his head, she said, because he heard his mama, and when he turned, the woods opened. The word open made the air around us feel thinner. Elijah wrote that the trees didn't move, Lottie said. The trees stayed trees, but the space between them became wrong. I felt dizzy. Elijah wrote that it didn't walk, Lottie said. It shifted, like a long shape unfolding, like something straightening up after being bent for 100 years. The chain sound became louder, nearer, as if it approved. Ruth swung the knife, Lottie said, and the knife did something. She paused. It cut the air, she whispered. Not flesh, not cloth. The air itself tore just a little, like cloth snagging on a nail. My breath caught. And when the air tore, she said, Ruth screamed, not because she was hurt, but because she saw what was behind it. Lottie's voice became almost reverent with dread. She saw a place that wasn't land, she whispered, a place that wasn't sky, a place where the dark had layers like water, and something huge moved under those layers. The hollow in front of us seemed to deepen. I felt like if I stared too long, I'd see the layers too. Ruth dropped her knife, Lottie said, and she ran. The tension in my chest loosened a fraction. But she ran the wrong way, Lottie whispered. My stomach clenched again. She ran toward Whitcomb, Lottie said, toward the plantation, toward the man who owned her. I blinked, confused. Why? Because terror breaks your compass, Lottie said. Because sometimes the devil you know feels safer than the devil you just saw. The chain sound shifted again, coming from behind the trees now. Ben grabbed Elijah, Lottie continued. Ben dragged him away from the dip. Elijah didn't want to go. Elijah wanted to look. Elijah wanted to understand. That curiosity, that is what made him live so long and what made him suffer. She leaned closer to the hollow, voice low. Elijah pulled free, she whispered. He turned back. He looked at the hallway one more time. I felt the woods tighten around us. And the thing looked back, Lottie said. A whisper brushed my ear again, too faint to be words but intimate, as if something had pressed its mouth to the world. Lottie's hand pressed harder into the mud. Elijah wrote that in that moment, she said. He felt a hook go into him, not into his skin, into his years, into his future. My throat went tight. A hook? Lottie nodded slowly. Like the thing marked him, she whispered. Like it said, you're mine to return. The chain sound became clear now, as if someone stood just out of sight, shifting iron from one hand to another. Then the paper on the mud, the page with the word run, fluttered once, no wind. It lifted slightly at the edges like invisible fingers had touched it. Lottie's face tightened. We're done, she whispered. What? She snatched the paper up so fast it nearly tore, then stood and stepped back from the hollow. The chain sound surged, angry now. The corridor between the trees seemed to stretch, the shadows deepening. Lottie grabbed my arm. Move, she hissed. We backed away quickly, not turning our backs fully, not crossing the salt line too fast. My heart pounded so hard I could taste it. The chain sound followed, not closer exactly, but louder, like it was inside the trunks, inside the needles, inside my teeth. Then, clear as day, clear as a voice right beside my ear, my name came again. Daniel. My mouth opened from instinct. Lottie slapped me across the face. Pain exploded. My eyes watered. "Don't," she snarled, and her voice was the first true human sound I'd heard in what felt like hours. I clamped my jaw shut, breathing through my nose, shaking. The whisper lingered a moment, almost amused. Then it withdrew, like a tide pulling back. The chain sound faded with it, leaving only the oppressive silence again. Lottie didn't stop moving until we were well past the corridor, well back into trees that looked normal again, where the light felt like it belonged to the world. Finally, she let go of my arm. My cheek burned where she'd hit me. My pride burned hotter, but my fear burned hottest of all, because I understood something now with a clarity that left no room for argument. Something knew me. Lottie stared at my face, breathing hard. "You almost answered," she said. "I didn't," I rasped. "You almost did," she repeated, "and that's enough for it to start practicing your voice in its mouth." My stomach flipped. "What does that mean?" "It means it'll get better at sounding like what you trust," she said. "It'll sound like your mother, your friend, your own thoughts." She leaned in close. "And it means you're not just writing Elijah's story anymore." I swallowed, throat raw. "Then what am I doing?" Lottie's eyes were dark and steady. "You're standing where he stood," she said, "and you're being offered the same mistake." She reached into her satchel and pulled out the wrapped key again. "This is why Elijah locked the box," she whispered. "Because that thing wants the door open from this side, and it needs a living hand." My pulse hammered. "So why bring me here at all?" Lottie's jaw tightened. "Because it already knows," she said. "And because now you know it." She slipped the key away. Then, very softly, she added the words that made my blood go cold all over again. "Next time it calls, it won't ask nicely. Next time it calls, it won't ask nicely." Lottie didn't say anything else after that. We walked back toward town in a silence so thick it felt like something we could trip over. The woods slowly gave way to thinner trees, then to brush, then to the edge of the road where sunlight looked almost fake. Too bright, too clean, like a stage set pretending to be the world. Only when the first house came into view did I realize my hands were still shaking. "You're going back to your boarding house," Lottie said without looking at me. "You're going to sleep. Or at least you're going to lie down and pretend." "And you?" I asked. "I'm going to move the box," she said. My heart jumped. "Move it where?" "Somewhere it won't find as easy," she replied. "Not that that ever lasts." She stopped at the edge of town, where the dirt road met the first line of fences. "And listen carefully," she added. "You don't open anything, you don't follow any sound, and if you see the mark again—" "The notch," I said. "Yes," she said. "If you see it, you come get me, you don't touch it, you don't try to understand it." I hesitated. "What if it comes for me before morning?" Lottie finally looked at me. There was no comfort in her eyes, only honesty. "Then," she said, "you hope it's still learning your voice." She turned and walked away before I could ask anything else. The town felt wrong after the woods. Too open, too ordinary. People moved about their evening routines, and for a moment I wondered if I'd imagined everything, until I remembered the whisper of my name in a place where no human should have been. At the boarding house, Mrs. Pritchard didn't ask me where I'd been. She only looked at my face, at the pale line where Lottie's slap had landed, and said, "You went too far." "I'm fine," I said, though my voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. She studied me for a long moment, then handed me a small bowl. "Salt," she said. "Put some by your window." I stared at it. "You believe in this too?" Her mouth tightened. "I believe in staying alive." Upstairs, my room looked exactly as I'd left it. The bed was neatly made. The desk was where I'd left my papers. The window was closed. I locked the door, then unlocked it, then locked it again. I poured a thin line of salt along the inside of the windowsill like Lottie had done. Then I sat on the edge of the bed and tried to breathe like a normal person. Sleep did not come. Every sound made me flinch. The creak of the building settling, the distant bark of a dog, the soft footfalls of someone moving in the hallway. At some point, exhaustion dragged me under anyway. I dreamed of a hallway where the walls were made of trees and the floor was made of water. I dreamed of something tall unfolding. I dream. Ed spoke with my voice. I woke up choking on my own breath. For a moment I didn't know where I was. Then the shape of the room came back to me, and then I saw the window. My blood turned to ice. On the underside of the windowsill, on the inside of the room, was a fresh carving, the notch symbol. It was small, but the lines were sharp and pale, as if the wood had been cut minutes ago. I sat frozen, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. The salt line was still there, undisturbed. I did not remember getting up. I did not remember touching the window, and yet the mark was there. Something had been in my room. I forced myself to stand, every muscle screaming to run. I checked the door. Still locked. I checked under the bed. Nothing. I checked the wardrobe. Empty, but the air felt used, like a room after someone has just left it. I touched the carved mark with one fingertip. The wood was cold, not cool. Cold. I snatched my hand back and wiped it on my trousers like I'd touched something filthy. Lottie had said to come get her. I didn't bother packing. I didn't bother thinking. I ran. The streets were quiet in that early gray hour before dawn. My footsteps echoed too loudly, and every shadow looked like it might stand up. Lottie's house looked the same as always. Clean porch, closed windows, stillness like a held breath. I pounded on the door. It opened almost immediately. Lottie stood there fully dressed, coat on, satchel slung over her shoulder. "You saw it," she said. "Yes," I whispered. "It was in my room." She nodded once. "It found you faster than I hoped." She stepped aside and let me in. The house smelled different, sharper, like smoke and herbs. The lockbox was gone from the back room. "You moved it," I said. "Yes," she replied. "Not far. Far don't matter." I swallowed. "It carved the mark inside my room, with the door locked." "That means it's not knocking anymore," she said. "It's checking the frame." I stared at her. "Checking it for what?" "For how thin it is," she said. She set her satchel on the table and pulled out the wrapped key. She didn't unwrap it. "Sit," she said. I sat. Lottie poured 2 cups of water from a jug and pushed one toward me. "No sweet tea." "Drink," she said. "Slow." My hands shook as I did. "You're going to tell me what Elijah told me," she said. "All of it. Not the pieces he wrote down, the part he only said once and only because he was dying." I looked at her. "You were there?" She nodded. "He sent for me, 2 nights before he died." "What did he say?" Lottie closed her eyes for a moment, as if bracing herself. "He said, 'It's starting to remember me,'" she whispered. "And when it remembers me, it'll remember the way back." A chill ran through me. "The way back from where?" Lottie opened her eyes. "From the place that is not a place." She leaned forward. "Elijah didn't just see the hallway," she said. "He went through it." My stomach dropped. "He never said that in the journals, because he didn't write it," she said. "He was afraid words would make it easier to follow." She stood and began pacing. "When Ben dragged him away that night, Elijah fought him," she said. "Not because he wanted to die, because he wanted to understand what he'd seen." "That curiosity again," I murmured. "Yes," Lottie said. "It's a dangerous hunger." She stopped pacing and looked at me. 3 nights later, she said, Elijah went back alone. My heart started racing. "Why?" "Because the hallway kept showing up in his dreams," she said. "Because he heard things when he was awake. Because once you know there's a door, the idea of not opening it starts to rot your thoughts." I swallowed. "Did he tell you what was on the other side?" Lottie hesitated. "He said it wasn't a place you walk into," she said slowly. "It was a place you fall into and you don't fall forward." "Then which way?" I asked. She met my eyes. "You fall through." The word made my ski. "Oh." "He said time didn't move right there," Lottie continued. "Not forward, not backward, it folded. Like someone kept turning the same page in a book, but the page was made of years." I tried to imagine that and failed. "Elijah said he was there for weeks," she said. "He felt hunger, he slept, he dreamed." "But," I prompted, "but when he came back," she said, "only 3 days had passed here." My breath caught. "That's impossible." Lottie gave a humorless smile. "Yes." She sat down heavily across from me. "He said the place was full of impressions," she said. "Not people, not things, more like shadows of things that had once been." "Like Josiah," I whispered. Lottie's jaw tightened. "He said he saw something that might have been Josiah, or might have been what was left after Josiah stopped being a person." My stomach turned. "He said there were layers," she continued, "like deep water, and something moved under those layers, something so big you only ever saw parts of it." My hands clenched. "The thing in the hallway?" "Yes," she said, "but he said it looked smaller there, like the hallway was just one finger of a much larger hand." I shivered. "Elijah said it didn't speak with words there," Lottie went on. "It spoke with arrangements, with where things were allowed to be, with how long you were allowed to stay." She leaned closer. "And he said it noticed him immediately," she whispered, "not because he was special, but because he was new." "What did it do to him?" I asked. Lottie looked away. "It didn't hurt him," she said. "Not at first." "Not at first," I repeated. "He said it tested him," she said, "like you test a piece of rope before you trust it. He said sometimes the place would stretch, and sometimes it would shrink, and sometimes he'd lose whole hours inside a single step." "That sounds like madness," I said. "Yes," she replied, "and yet he came back." "How?" I asked. Lottie reached into her satchel and pulled out something I hadn't seen before. A thin, brittle piece of wood, shaped like part of a door frame. "He broke something," she said. My pulse jumped. "He broke the door?" "He said there wasn't a door to break," she replied. "Tea killed half a generation. So was a sickness that took whole towns. The world's been insane a long time, Mr. Mercer. Most of it just pretends not to notice." She stood. "Elijah said something else," she said. "Something he begged me to remember." "What?" "He said, if it ever starts carving on the inside, it means it's figured out the shape of the house." My skin prickled. "And then?" I asked. "He said, then it's not looking for the door anymore. It's looking for the person who can be one." My mouth went dry. "I don't want this," I said. "Neither did Elijah," she replied. She walked to the window and peered out at the morning light. "You're not ready," she said, "which is good. It likes people who think they are." She turned back to me. "But you're already in the story," she said. "And stories like this don't let their witnesses leave clean." I rubbed my face. "What do we do?" Lottie's eyes hardened. "We make sure you don't become an anchor," she said. "And we make sure that box stays closed." She hesitated. "And we pray," she added quietly, "that whatever it's doing, it's still slow." A sound came from outside, not a voice, not chains, a simple, ordinary sound. Footsteps on the porch. Lottie's head snapped up. We both froze. The footsteps stopped right outside the door. Then someone knocked. 3 slow, polite knocks. Lottie whispered, "Don't answer." The knock came again, and this time the voice that spoke was my own. "Daniel," it said gently, "it's me. You forgot something." The thing is now using my voice at the door. "Daniel," it said gently, "it's me. You forgot something." The words were perfect. The tone was perfect. Even the small hesitation between me and you was exactly how I spoke when I was trying to sound casual. My stomach turned to water. Lottie did not move. She did not breathe. She only lifted one finger in front of her lips and shook her head once, slowly. "Do not answer." The knock came again. 3 polite taps. "Daniel," my voice said, "open up. It's cold out here." I had the insane, overwhelming urge to stand up and do exactly that. Not because I believed it, because some deep, animal part of me wanted the tension to stop. Lottie reached into her coat and drew out a small, dull-looking knife. Not for the door, for me. She held it where I could see it, her eyes locked on mine. "If you move," that look said, "I will stop you." The voice outside sighed. A small, familiar sound. One I made when I was pretending not to be annoyed. "You're being rude," it said. "I walked all this way." My skin crawled, then it changed tactics. The voice softened. The tone shifted, and suddenly it wasn't my voice anymore. It was my mother's. "Danny," it called. "Why won't you answer me, sweetheart?" My chest seized. My mother had been dead for 8 years. I hadn't told Lottie that. I hadn't told anyone in this town that. Lottie's eyes flicked to my face and widened just a fraction. She could hear it too. The voice continued, warm and worried. "You're scaring me," it said. "Open the door." Tears burned behind my eyes and rage followed them immediately. "How does it know?" I whispered. Lottie whispered back, "It's not copying voices anymore." The handle of the door twitched, not turning, just testing, like fingers trying a pulse. Lottie moved. She stepped forward and in a clear, strong voice that did not shake said, "You're not welcome here." The thing outside paused, then it laughed, not with my laugh, not with my mother's, with something that sounded like several voices trying to agree on a shape. "Everything that has a door is welcome to me," it said. The handle twitched again. Lottie reached into her satchel and pulled out a small pouch. She threw it at the door. It burst against the wood, scattering ash and salt. The air in the room thudded like a struck drum. Outside, something hissed, not in pain, in irritation. The voice changed to Guy. This time it became familiar in a different way. Elijah's. I had only heard it described, only read it in memory. But somehow I knew. "Lottie," it said quietly, "you always were stubborn." Lottie went pale. "You don't get to use his voice," she said. "Why?" the thing asked. "He was mine longer than he was yours." My heart slammed. It knows Elijah. No, it doesn't just know him. It remembers him. The door shuddered once, not like something hitting it, like something leaning on it from the wrong side. Lottie whispered, "It's too close. It followed the mark." I stared at her. "The one in my room." "Yes," she said, "that wasn't a message. That was a measurement." Another knock, harder this time. "Daniel," Elijah's voice said, gentle and tired, "you already carry it. You might as well open the door and stop pretending." My head rang. "What does it mean, I already carry it?" I whispered. Lottie's eyes never left the door. "It means it's learning the shape of you." The handle turned, just a little. Lottie moved faster than I thought she could. She grabbed my arm and yanked me away from the door toward the back of the house. "Window," she hissed. "Now." The front door banged as if something had struck it with a heavy shoulder, not trying to break it, testing how much it could. We ran down the narrow hall. The back room was empty, the lockbox already gone. Lottie shoved the window open. "Out," she said. Another bang, harder. The wood groaned. We climbed out into the small yard behind the house. The moment my feet hit the ground, I heard it. Chains, not in the distance, right behind the walls, dragging, searching. The front door burst open, not splintered, not broken, just opened, like it had been unlocked from the other side. We ran. We didn't look back. We ran through fences, through yards, through narrow alleys, between sleeping houses. The sound followed, not fast, not slow, unavoidable, like something that didn't need to hurry because time moved around it. We reached the edge of town, lungs burning. Lottie grabbed my arm and pulled me into a dried-out drainage ditch lined with broken brick and weeds. "Down," she whispered. We crouched. The sound passed, not footsteps, not exactly, more like pressure moving through space, like the air itself was being displaced. We waited. Seconds stretched. then minutes, then longer. Finally, Lottie exhaled slowly. "It went back," she said. "For now." My whole body shook. What is it?" I asked. Lottie looked at me in the gray morning light, her face older than it had been the day before. "It's the thing that owns the hallway," she said. "But not just that." She stood. "Come," she said. "There's something you need to see." "Where?" I asked. "Somewhere Elijah tried to hide from it," she said, "and failed." We didn't go back to town. We took a side road that led toward old farmland, then into broken fields where the fences had fallen and the earth had been left to remember itself. There, half swallowed by weeds and time, stood the remains of a small house, just a foundation, one partial wall, and a chimney like a finger pointing at nothing. "Elijah lived here," Lottie said. "When?" 1873, she replied. "For almost 10 years, longer than anywhere else." I frowned. "Why here?" "Because this is where he thought it couldn't find him," she said. She walked to the chimney and touched the brick. He was wrong. She knelt and brushed aside dirt and weeds. Underneath was stone, and carved into the stone, the notch symbol dozens of times, layered, old ones, newer ones, some deep, some shallow. "He kept finding it," Lottie said quietly, "on his walls, under his bed, on the inside of his door frame." My stomach turned. "Like me," I whispered. "Yes," she said. She stood and looked at the ruin. "You want to know what it did while it waited?" she asked. I nodded. "It followed him," she said. "Through history." She told me the rest as we sat on the broken stones. Elijah moved every few years. Different towns, different names, different jobs. Sometimes he worked on docks, sometimes on farms, sometimes in factories. Everywhere he went, strange things happened. Not immediately, but eventually. People went missing, Lottie said. Not crowds, just one at a time. A dock worker who stepped into a shadow and didn't come out. A child who followed a voice into the trees. A woman who went into her cellar and was never seen again. "And the mark?" I asked. Lottie nodded. "Always nearby." She pulled out a folded paper from her satchel and handed it to me. It was a newspaper clipping. "Fire at tenement. 3 dead, 1 missing." Another, "Local farmhand vanishes. No signs of struggle." Another, "Strange accident at mill. Body never recovered." All places Elijah had lived within the last 5 years, Lottie said. I looked up at her. "It was using his proximity." "Yes," she said. "He was like a gravity well." "And it was feeding," I whispered. Lottie's eyes were dark. "It was learning." She took the papers back. "Elijah said it wasn't just taking people," she said. "It was taking patterns." "What does that mean?" "It wasn't just eating bodies," she said. "It was studying lives." I felt a cold understanding begin to form. "That's how it knows my mother," I said. Lottie nodded. "That's how it knows Elijah's voice. That's how it knew how to knock." My hands curled into fists. "And every time it learned enough," she continued, "it would try to get closer to him." "Try to open the door," I said. "Yes." "But Elijah never let it," she said. "He ran. He hid. He broke routines. He refused to stay still." "And that's why he lived so long," I said. Lottie looked at me. "That's why he lived tired." She reached into her satchel and pulled out a small notebook. "This is the only journal he kept that he never meant anyone to read," she said. She opened it. The handwriting was cramped, nervous. "It doesn't want me dead. It wants me placed. I am not a person to it. I am a location. When I sleep, I feel it measuring. When I wake, I feel it correcting." I swallowed. Another page. "I think it can only come through if someone is standing where I stood. I think that's what I am now. A standing place." I looked up at her slowly. "That's what it means to be a door," I said. "Yes," Lottie replied. "Not something you open, something you become." We sat in silence for a while. Then I asked the question that had been growing like a tumor in my mind. "If it followed him for over 100 years, I said, "why did it stop?" Lottie's gaze went distant. "It didn't," she said. "It just got closer." "What changed?" "Elijah got tired," she said, "and sick, and slow." She closed the notebook. "And one day," she said, "he made a mistake." My pulse quickened. "What mistake?" "He stayed in one place too long," she said, "and that's when it caught up," I whispered. Lottie nodded. "It couldn't take him," she said. "Not yet, not while he was still anchored to this side." "But it could do something else," she said. "What?" I asked. She looked at me. "It could start getting ready for the next one." The ground seemed to tilt. "You mean?" "Yes," she said. "You're not the first person. It tested after Elijah." I stared at her. "Who else?" Lottie's jaw tightened. "There was a preacher," she said, 10 years ago, came to town, charismatic, stayed 6 months, started hearing voices in his church, started preaching about doors and thresholds and the hidden rooms of God." My blood ran cold. "What happened to him?" "He walked into the woods one night," she said, "and they found his shoes at the edge of the pine line." "And the mark?" I asked. Lottie nodded. "All over the inside of his house." I closed my eyes. "So it's refining the process," I said. "Yes," she replied. "Learning what kind of mind bends." Best. I opened my eyes, and it chose me. Lottie didn't deny it. She stood. We can't stay near town, she said, and we can't stay near where you sleep. Where do we go? I asked. She hesitated. There's one place it hates, she said. Why? Because Elijah heard it there, she said. My heart thudded. Where? Lottie looked toward the distant pines. The plantation that never existed, she said. My stomach clenched. You mean the wound, I whispered. Yes, she said. The center of it. A long silence. You want to take me to it, I asked. I want to take you near it, she corrected, so it can't use you without showing its hand. That sounds like bait, I said. She met my eyes. It is, she said. That night we didn't sleep in any house. We stayed in a small hunting shack miles from town, a place with no name and no address. Lottie ringed it with salt and ash. I sat with my back to a wall and a knife in my hand I didn't know how to use. I didn't sleep. Sometime after midnight I heard it. Not outside, not inside, in my head, not words. Images. My childhood home, my mother in the kitchen, my old bedroom, and in the corner of every memory, a hallway that hadn't been there before. I squeezed my eyes shut and whispered, no. The images faded, but I knew. It wasn't just copying voices anymore. It was copying me. Near dawn, Lottie spoke into the gray light. It followed Elijah through history, she said. I looked at her. And now, she said quietly, it's following you through memory. I swallowed. What happens when it catches up? I asked. Lottie's face was grim. Then, she said, it stops needing to knock. Then it stops needing to knock. Lottie said it like a verdict, not a warning. We left the hunting shack before sunrise. The air was still cold and colorless, the kind of gray that makes the world look unfinished. I hadn't slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my childhood hallway stretching longer than it should. Doors multiplying where there had only ever been two. Lottie walked ahead, steady and purposeful. She'd packed light, salt, ash, the wrapped key, the knife, and Elijah's hidden notebook. No food, no blanket. Where exactly are we going? I asked. She didn't stop. To the wound. That's not a place, I said. She glanced back at me. That's what everybody says, right up until they step into it. We followed a dirt track that hadn't been a road in decades, then cut across fields that had gone back to weeds. As the sun rose, the land began to look familiar. Not in the sense that I'd been there before, in the sense that my body reacted before my mind could. My chest felt tight. My head ached. The air smelled faintly of smoke that wasn't there. Lottie, I said slowly, this looks like 3 other places Elijah lived, she finished. Yes. I stopped walking. She turned. You said the plantation wasn't just a place, I said. You said it was a wound. You're telling me now it can move? She studied my face. Not move, she said. Repeat. My stomach dropped. Repeat. It doesn't exist in one location, she said. It exists wherever the door is getting thin. I thought of the ruins we'd seen. It's the same place. I stared. The house was too intact to be ruins, too new to be real, and yet. Do you smell that? I asked. She nodded. Smoke and flowers, rot pretending to be perfume. The air felt heavy again, like the woods, like the hallway. We approached slowly. The closer we got, the more details sharpened, and the more wrong they felt. The paint on the house was uncracked, but dull, like it had never dried properly. The windows reflected the sky, but not quite correctly, as if the glass remembered a different day. No birds, no insects, no sound, just the faint, distant clink of chains. This is insane, I whispered. Yes, Lottie said. That's how it hides. We reached the edge of the yard. There was a fence, white, perfectly straight, no gate. Do we cross it? I asked. Lottie hesitated. Then she reached into her satchel and pulled out the carved wooden token. She held it out in front of her. The token grew warm, not hot. Warm. And in my chest something pulled, like gravity had found a new direction. It wants you closer, Lottie said. My heart hammered. So we don't go. She shook her head. We go close enough that it can't pretend it doesn't see us, she said, but not far enough to let it finish the thought. We walked along the fence line. As we did, I noticed something that made my skin crawl. The fence posts weren't wood, they were shapes, different shapes. A broken chair leg, a bedpost, a church pew fragment, all painted white, all repurposed. This place is built out of leftovers, I whispered. Out of stories, Lottie corrected. Out of people's rooms, people's houses, people's lives. We reached a point where the fence dipped as if the ground beneath it had sagged. The pull in my chest intensified. Lottie stopped. This is close enough, she said. She knelt and poured salt and ash. The moment he did, this place started to become permanent. I looked at the house. So when he died, It was free to finish, she said. The ground under us vibrated slightly, not an earthquake, a presence shifting its weight. The chain sound grew clearer, not all around, from the house. The front door was opening. Slowly, silently. The inside was too dark. Lottie's hand closed around my wrist. "Don't look straight at it," she whispered. "Look at the edges." A shape moved in the doorway. Not a clear shape, more like a wrongness in the dark. The air in front of it bent. My head started to hurt, like my brain was trying to reject what my eyes were reporting. "It's here," I breathed. "Yes," she said, "and it's listening." The shape did not step out. It did not need to. The space between us and the house shortened, not physically, conceptually, like the distance had decided it was unnecessary. I felt a tug inside my chest, inside my memories. I saw my childhood hallway again, longer now, with doors I didn't recognize. "Lottie," I whispered, "it's inside my head." She nodded. "That's how it walks." The shape in the doorway shifted, and suddenly, I was standing in my old house, but the windows were wrong. The walls were too far apart, and at the end of the hallway, the plantation door, I gasped and staggered. The vision shattered. I was back in the dirt, inside the salt circle, heart racing. "You didn't move," Lottie said. "That's good. That means it's still practicing." I stared at her. "It just put a place in my head." "Yes," she said, "that's what it does." The shape in the doorway spoke, not with a voice, with a memory. I saw Elijah, old, tired, sitting in his chair. I saw him stand. I saw him walk toward a door that hadn't been there before. I saw him hesitate. I saw him sit back down. The memory ended. The meaning did not. "It's showing me how he died," I whispered. "It's showing you how he stopped," she corrected. The pull inside me intensified. "You see now," she said. "It doesn't need to drag you anywhere, it just needs you to accept a room it offers." The shape shifted again, and I understood something horrible. "This place," I whispered, "it's not just waiting for a door." "No," Lottie said softly, "it's waiting for someone to live in it." The realization crushed the air out of me. "Elijah didn't survive 129 years, I said. "He delayed it." "Yes," she said. "He was a moving barrier." The shape in the doorway leaned. The salt circle hissed faintly. "Why bring me here?" I demanded. "Why show me this?" Lottie's grip tightened on my wrist. "Because it already chose you," she said. "And because you need to understand what kind of choice it offers." I stared at the house, at the impossible stillness, at the promise of rest hiding in it. My legs felt weak. "And what is that choice?" I asked. Lottie met my eyes. "You can run," she said, "for years, decades if you're careful. Keep it unfolded." The buildings did not disappear. They rearranged, turned into trees, into open field, into nothing. Within seconds, we were standing in an ordinary clearing. No house, no fence, no yard, just wind and grass. I stared, shaking. "It moved." Lottie shook her head. "No, it decided not to finish here." She looked at me. "That means it'll try somewhere else." My stomach sank. "Where?" I asked. She didn't answer right away. She just looked at me, and in her eyes I saw the truth before she said it. "Somewhere you start to feel safe," she said. We walked away in silence. After a long while I asked, "What's the plan?" Lottie's voice was tired. "The same plan Elijah had," she said. "We keep you moving. We keep it following. We don't let it settle." "And if I get tired?" I asked. She stopped and faced me. "Then we'll have to make sure you never get the chance to rest," she said. I didn't know whether to thank her or fear her. That night, as we camped far from any town, I dreamed of houses, hundreds of them, all with doors that weren't there yesterday, and in every one, a room waiting, and in every one, a room waiting. I woke before dawn with that phrase stuck in my head like a splinter. For a moment I didn't know where I was. Then the cold ground pressed through my coat, and the memory of the clearing, of the plantation folding itself back into nothing, came rushing in. Lottie was already awake, sitting with her back to a tree, cleaning the small knife with a cloth. The fire had burned down to coals. The woods around us were ordinary again, birds starting to test the morning with cautious chirps, leaves moving in a breeze that didn't feel like breathing. "You dreamed," she said without looking up. "Of houses," I replied. "Too many." She nodded once. "It's practicing." We packed quickly. No breakfast, no conversation. I felt a pressure behind my eyes that wasn't quite a headache, more like the afterimage of a bright light, something I'd looked at too long. "Where are we going?" I asked as we started walking. "To where Elijah hid what he didn't want found," Lottie said. "Not the box you saw in my house, the real one." I frowned. "You said the box was moved." "I said the box was moved," she replied, "not the thing it protects." My stomach tightened. "So there are two?" "There were always two," she said. "One for show, one for truth." We cut through woods that looked like woods again, then followed a creek until it narrowed into a ribbon. The sun climbed, and with it came that faint smell of smoke and flowers, never quite present, never quite gone. Does it know where we're going? I asked. It knows where you are, Lottie said. It doesn't need directions. We reached a small, forgotten cemetery around noon. Not the town cemetery. This one had no fence, no neat rows, just a handful of stones and wooden markers half swallowed by time. Some names were still legible, many were not. At the far edge stood a marker with no name at all, just a symbol, the notch. I felt the pull in my chest again, like a compass needle trying to turn me. This is it, Lottie said. It's a grave, I whispered. Yes, she said, and a lie. She knelt and began clearing away leaves and weeds around the base of the marker. The ground there was packed hard, as if it had been disturbed and reset many times. Elijah buried a man here, she said. I blinked. What? He buried a name, she corrected. Ben's. My stomach clenched. The man who ran with him. Yes, she said. Ben didn't make it far after that night. He lasted a few years. He drank, he talked. He tried to pretend he hadn't seen what he saw, and one day he walked into the woods and came back, wrong. My pulse quickened. Like possessed? Lottie shook her head. No, like he'd left something behind and brought something else back to fill the space. She stood. Elijah put him down himself. The words landed with a dull finality. And then, he buried him here, I said. And he buried something else with him, she replied. She reached into her satchel and pulled out the wrapped brass key. Help me, she said. We dug. The earth was stubborn, roots fighting us. My hands blistered. The smell of damp soil filled my nose. As we worked, that faint chain sound flickered at the edge of hearing, then vanished. After what felt like an hour, my shovel hit something that was not earth, wood. Lottie's eyes sharpened. We cleared the dirt carefully. A small coffin, not a real one. More like a box made to look like one. It's not him, I said. No, she replied. It's what he was carrying. She pried the lid open. Inside was another box, smaller than the one I'd seen before. Darker wood, no decoration and no visible lock, just a seam. My heart hammered. How do we open it? Lottie hesitated, then took out the brass key and held it over the seam. Nothing happened. She frowned. Then she turned the key sideways and pressed the notch against the seam like a stamp. The wood softened, not melted, reconsidered. A thin line opened along the seam. I stepped back, breath caught. The box opened by itself. Inside were three things. A stack of papers tied with twine, a small flat stone carved with the notch symbol, and a map, not a normal map. It was drawn on what looked like old skin, maybe vellum, yellowed and thin. The lines were not roads or rivers. They were rooms, rectangles and corridors, and scattered among them, written in Elijah's cramped hand, were dates. This isn't a map of land, I whispered. No, Lottie said. It's a map of appearances. She untied the papers and handed me the first page. If you are reading this, then I am either dead or too tired to stop you. I am sorry for both of those things. My throat tightened. Another page. The thing does not come through doors. It makes doors out of people who stop moving. It cannot be killed. It cannot be argued with. It can only be delayed. I swallowed. Another. There is a way to close a door that was never meant to exist, but it is not a way that leaves the closer untouched. Lottie leaned in. What does it say? She asked. Everything I don't want to hear, I replied. We sat on the ground beside the open grave and read. Elijah's writing grew shakier as the pages went on, but also more precise. He described the place not a place in clearer terms than he ever had to Lottie. It is not a world, it is a fold. A place where things that should be far apart are pressed together until they forget what distance is. The thing is not a creature. It is a process that learned to want. I felt cold reading that. When it touches a life, it does not take the life. It takes the shape of the life. It uses that shape to build rooms. I thought of my childhood hallway. It needs an anchor because it cannot finish a fold without something that believes in staying. I looked up at Lottie. That's me. She didn't deny it. We kept reading. Elijah had tried many things, burning places where the mark appeared, flooding cellars, even trying to starve it by isolating himself in the desert for 3 years. It followed anyway. It always follows. But it does not like to follow. It prefers to wait. There was a page with a list of names. Some had dates next to them, some had only question marks. Ben's name was there, Ruth's, Josiah's, and others I didn't recognize. This is everyone it took, I whispered. Or tried to, Lottie said. We reached the last section. The handwriting was barely legible. The door can be closed, but only from this side, not by destroying the place, but by reversing the fold. To do this, the anchor must be made to move in all directions at once. I frowned. That doesn't make sense. Lottie's eyes narrowed. Keep reading. A life that is everywhere is nowhere to build. The thing will try to hold the anchor still, if the anchor can be made to occupy too many. Remembered rooms at once, the fold collapses. My head hurt. You're saying I have to be in multiple places at the same time? Not physically, Lottie said slowly. In memory. I read the next line. The stone will help, the map will guide, the cost will be everything that makes the anchor feel like a single story. I closed my eyes. It will break me. Lottie was quiet. Not kill you, she said, but you won't come back the same. I looked at the stone in the box. What is this? Elijah called it a weight, she said. A way to pin too many rooms together. I picked it up. It was heavier than it looked, heavier than it should be. And the map, I asked. She turned it so we could both see. It shows where the door has tried to form before, she said, and where it will try again. I traced one of the rectangles with my finger. It matched the ruin we'd seen. Another matched the clearing. Another, my stomach dropped, matched my boarding house. It already knows, I whispered. Yes, she said. We heard it before we felt it. The chain sound, not distant, not near, aligned, like it was finding the same rhythm as our breathing. Lottie stiffened. It knows the box is open. The air grew thick again. The cemetery felt closer, smaller, like the edges were being pushed in. Close it, I said. We can't, she replied. Not like that. Why not? Because now you have read it, she said. The instructions don't live in the box anymore. The chain sound turned into a slow, deliberate drag. Something shifted between the trees, not walking, arranging. I saw the space between two headstones shorten. Lottie, I whispered. It's starting to. I know, she said. We have to move. We stuffed the papers, the stone, and the map into the satchel. Lottie slammed the small box shut and pressed the notch key against the seam again. The seam closed, the wood hardened. We didn't bother reburying it. We ran. The cemetery tried to become something else as we left it. Paths that hadn't been there appeared. A low building flickered at the edge of sight, a porch that didn't belong. The smell of smoke and flowers thickened. Don't look straight at it, Lottie shouted. We ran with our eyes on the ground. Branches snagged my clothes. Roots tried to trip me. The chain sound followed, not chasing, not falling behind, repositioning. We burst out of the trees into open field. The world snapped back into place behind us like a stretched rubber band released. We collapsed, gasping. After a long minute, the chain sound faded. Lottie sat up, breathing hard. It's getting faster, she said. I nodded. I felt different, not hurt, not sick, but expanded, like my thoughts had more corners. We have the instructions, I said. Yes, she replied, and now it has proof you're willing to look at them. I stared at the horizon. Elijah wrote that the cost would be everything that makes me feel like a single story. Lottie's voice was quiet. He was telling the truth. So what do we do? I asked. She met my eyes. We prepare you, she said, to be many. The word made my skin crawl. That night, in another nameless place, Lottie spread the map out. We studied it. Some of the rectangles had dates in the past. Some had dates in the future. One date was circled, soon. Where is that? I asked. Lottie followed the lines. Then her fingers stopped. Her face went pale. That's, she said slowly, that's where you were born. My heart lurched. You mean? Yes, she said. It's not just following you. She looked at me with grim certainty. It's going home through you. I lay awake that night, staring at the dark. I could feel rooms in my head, not memories, spaces, waiting. I could feel rooms in my head, not memories, not dreams, spaces, waiting. At first it was subtle, a pressure behind the eyes, a faint sense that if I turned a thought the wrong way, I'd find a door where no door should be. Lottie noticed before I said anything. You're quieter, she said the morning after we studied the map. I'm listening, I replied. She didn't look convinced. We were camped in a stand of trees miles from anywhere that had a name. The sky was pale, the air cold. The satchel lay between us, heavy with paper and stone and things that felt like promises made by someone who did not care who paid for them. Do you feel different? She asked. Yes, I said. Then after a moment, wider, she closed her eyes. That's how it starts, she said. We moved every day after that, not far, not in straight lines. The map told us where not to be more than where to go. Whenever we got too close to one of the rectangles, the world began to suggest itself. A road would look more inviting than it should. A house would appear at the edge of a field and then be gone when we looked directly at it. Once I smelled my mother's cooking and nearly walked into a creek. Lottie kept me moving. She never let me settle. But something else was changing. Sometimes when I closed my eyes, I wasn't in the woods anymore. I was in a room, always a room, different shapes, different light. One was my childhood bedroom, but the window looked out onto the pine line instead of our street. One was a narrow hallway with doors on both sides that breathed. One was a church basement that smelled of wet hymnals and had a door at the far end that wasn't there. The last time I blinked, the first time it happened while I was awake, I nearly screamed. We were walking along a fence line when the world slid, not vanished, rearranged. For half a second I was still in the field, and also standing in a small kitchen with a cracked linoleum floor. Both felt real. Both felt present. I staggered and grabbed Lottie's arm. She caught me before I fell. Room? She asked quietly. Yes, I whispered. It's starting. She nodded grimly. Then we're almost out of time. That night she did something she'd been avoiding. She took the stone from the satchel, the weight. She placed it between us on the ground. The air around it felt thicker, like heat above asphalt. Elijah wrote that the anchor has to be made to occupy too many rooms at once, she said. This is how we force that. I stared at the stone. What does it do? It pulls the rooms together, she said. It makes the fold unstable. And me, she hesitated. It makes you shared. My throat tightened. Across how many? She looked at the map. Across as many as it takes. We argued. I didn't want to. She didn't pretend it was safe. But the rectangles on the map were getting closer together, and some of them were changing, new lines appearing where there had been none. It's not just following anymore, she said. It's planning. On the third night after that, it spoke without using a voice. I was half asleep when I felt a presence in my thoughts, like someone standing too close behind me. Then I saw Elijah, not as he'd been at the end, as he'd been in the middle, strong, young-faced, tired eyes. He was sitting on a step that wasn't attached to any building. You don't have to do this, he said. I knew it wasn't really him, but the shape of him hurt anyway. You didn't, I said. He smiled sadly. I did, every day. I just never finished. What happens if I finish, I asked. The smile faded. You stop being one place, he said, and you start being a path. I woke up gasping. Lottie was already awake, watching me. It showed you, she said. Yes, I whispered. It's using him now. She nodded. It's running out of ways to pretend. We reached the last rectangle on the map 2 days later. It was a place that should have been nothing, just a stretch of forgotten land where an old road had been rerouted, but the air there tasted like smoke and flowers, and the pull in my chest was so strong I had to sit down. Here, Lottie said. It wants to finish here. I looked around. Nothing but grass, trees, sky, and yet, if you squint, I said, I can almost see the house. Yes, she replied. That means it already started building. She laid out the map and the papers, then she placed the stone in the center. Once we start, she said, we don't stop. What do? I asked. You remember, she said, everything, at once. She told me to sit, she told me to close my eyes, she told me to hold the stone. The moment my fingers touched it, the world multiplied. I was in the field, and in my childhood hallway, and in the church basement, and in Elijah's ruined house, and in places I had never been and somehow knew. My head felt like it was going to split open. Don't try to organize it, Lottie said, her voice coming from everywhere and nowhere. Let it overlap. I felt something notice, a pressure, a tension, the thing. It didn't arrive, it aligned. Suddenly the spaces between the rooms thinned. Doors appeared where there had been walls. Walls appeared where there had been air. I saw the plantation house begin to assemble itself out of pieces of other places. My childhood doorframe, a church stair, a hotel corridor I'd walked through once in Birmingham. The shape in the doorway was there, not fully, not finished, but present. And it was, pleased. I felt it reach for me, not physically, structurally. It tried to make one of the rooms stick. Don't let it choose, Lottie shouted. I forced myself to remember something else. My mother's kitchen, the creek, the boarding house, the cemetery, they all overlaid. The house flickered, the shape recoiled. The chain sound became a shriek of metal under strain. The stone grew heavier. My thoughts began to separate, not into voices, into directions. I was aware of being in too many places at once. I felt myself start to come apart. Elijah was wrong, the thing said, not in words but in certainty. You can't be everywhere. I almost agreed, then I understood. It wasn't afraid of me being nowhere. It was afraid of me being unusable. I leaned into the overlap, into the contradiction, into being a hallway that led to 3 different kitchens at once, into being a door that opened into a field and a church and a grave. The shape in the doorway warped. The house stuttered. The fold began to tear. The chain sound turned into something like screaming, but stretched across space. I felt something in me give way, not pain, identity. I was not one story anymore. I was a knot of stories, and that meant there was nowhere stable to build. The plantation began to collapse, not fall, unmake. Rooms forgot what they were connected to. Doors opened into sky. Floors became walls. The shape tried to hold on. It tried to anchor itself in me. I felt it reach. I let myself not be one place long enough for it to miss. The fold snapped. The world slammed back together. I was on the ground. The sky was overhead. The field was empty. No house, no fence, no chains, just wind and grass. I couldn't move. Lottie knelt beside me, her face pale. You did it, she said. My mouth moved. No sound came out. The rooms were quieter, not gone, but distant. Can it come back? I finally whispered. She looked at the empty field. Yes, she said, but it will have to start from nothing again, and it will have forgotten your shape. I closed my eyes. And me? I asked. She didn't answer right away. When she did, her voice was gentle and terrible. You're not a door anymore, she said, but you're not just a room either. What am I asked. She hesitated. A crossroads, she said. I tried to go back to my life. It didn't quite work. Some days I wake up knowing exactly where I am. Some days I wake up with the memory of 3 ceilings. I don't stay in one place long, not because I'm afraid, because I feel drafty, like if I stay too still, something might remember how to use me. Lottie and I parted ways after a while. Not angrily, just carefully. We talk sometimes, by letters. She says the marks have stopped appearing. The disappearances have stopped. For now, I don't write articles anymore. I write lists of places I've been, of rooms that no longer exist, of doors that almost did. Sometimes in quiet hotels or borrowed houses I feel it again, a suggestion of architecture inside my thoughts. But it never finishes the thought. Last week, in a town I won't name, I saw a man sitting on a bench outside a train station. He was very old, older than he looked. He was watching people like he was waiting for something to recognize him. When our eyes met, he flinched. Then he stood and walked away, and I knew, not that he was being followed, that he was being measured. I did not speak to him. I did not write him down. I kept walking, because I understand something now. The story is not about the door, it is about the witness. And as long as there are people who notice rooms that shouldn't exist, as long as there are minds that can be made into places, the thing will keep trying. And someone, somewhere, will feel a hallway in their head. And if you are reading this and thinking, that sounds familiar, if you've ever walked into a room and felt like it was waiting for you, then listen to me carefully. Don't stay, don't settle, and never, ever answer a voice that knows your name before you tell it.